Good day and welcome. I'm Rick, a man of history and your guide to the past. Today we're going to go back to medieval warfare. We're going to look at arrows and archers and mostly arrows. But before we begin, a quick aside. Now, I do hope you can forgive me. This video was not initially planned, certainly not as a long form video. It's going to be a little history short, but it turns out there's a lot to say about arrows, a lot to say about archery. So it's ended up as a long form video. So please bear with me, do excuse some of the production quality, and I hope you find it interesting and useful. So you've heard everything that I've got to say. That's enough from me. Let's speak to an expert. Oh, good day. As you can probably tell, I'm a bowman, and I'm a bowman ready for war. Now, there's a few differences you'll find between a civilian and a soldier with a bow. The first is that, well, soldiers tend to wear armour and civilians generally don't. It's not necessarily comfortable. This, even light as it is very warm. And the helmet is not uncomfortable, but it's not as comfortable as my hat. The next difference, of course, is that archers for war, well, they draw bigger, heavier bows. Not necessarily taller, but much more powerful. 2, 3, 4 times as much power, which means you're drawing 2, 3, 4 times as much weight to your ear every time the string is drawn back, compared with a civilian shooter, with somebody shooting targets or even hunting small game. That means that soldiers tend to have bigger shoulders, bigger muscles, and in some cases, deformed skeletons. The biggest difference you'll see not in their equipment is not just that the bow is much bigger for a war bow, but also the types of arrows that they're using. See, most civilians will use an arrow that looks something like this. Fairly standard shaft. Most shafts actually are not entirely flat. They'll barrel out either in the middle or towards the top to give you more power, particularly the war bows. But 3 flights, a knock, usually reinforce that with just a sliver of horn. Only has to be very thin, just to protect the arrow, the wood of the shaft. And then a head made of wood in this case, and blunt. Now, the reason for that is well, there's a number of reasons for that. The first is it's cheap, and you don't necessarily want to spend money with a blacksmith if you can't afford it, or you don't need to. Second is it's still perfectly good for target shooting. An arrow shot from even a relatively impowerful bow, or a relatively low powered bow, will penetrate a straw target, particularly if the straw is not hugely thickly woven. It's also very good for shooting small game. If you hit a rabbit or a bird with that, you'll kill it, and you'll kill it cleanly. Where if you use a heavier hunting shaft from a heavier bow, you'll just tear the rabbit or the bird into pieces. But perhaps the best reason is that if you're found in the king's forest, and the king owns almost all forests, with a sharp arrowhead, then clearly you are a poacher, and that is enough to have you punished. And the punishment might be a fine, it might be a flogging, but it's very hard to use a bow if you only have one hand. Other shafts that you might see people use, well, perhaps look like this. And this is a shaft that you may hear people talking about, with the 2 barbs designed to go deep into a wound and then to stay there, so that if you don't pull it out, it will move around, forcing you to be in pain and to bleed, which it will do. But also, if you pull it out, it will pull a great deal of flesh with you, which is true. This is, however, not an arrow designed to use against men on the battlefield. This is for use against deer or boar. If you don't kill the deer or the boar with your first good clean shot, this will ensure that either the deer will be slower and weakening and losing blood and eventually fall over, or that the boar will have the same and be less aggressive because of it. Because it's one thing to shoot a boar, it's another one to try and fight it with a dagger. A head such as this can be used in war, and it's an effective arrowhead against targets with little armour, but will do very little with a man that's wearing metal. It is, however, a good general use shaft against lightly armoured people, or against anybody or any game that you might find, particularly to the mid and larger size game. It would do somewhat more damage, penetrate somewhat more deeply, and give you a much better chance of killing that deer with your first good clean shot. It's also shaped very much like the head of a spear, which shows you that it can have some very good use in war. In battle though, most arrowheads are going to look like this. This is shaped rather like a chisel, with 4 flat, pointed, short heads, or 4 sides. It's designed to be driven into a person through protective armour, be that padding or plate. And these may not penetrate, particularly at long range, plate armour, and they may well not penetrate at moderate range, the thickest armour, the best armour. It might take close range and a lucky shot and a weaker point in the armour. But close range is where people will get if they want to come and fight you, and most archers are going to be behind something to protect you, at least ideally, be it stakes as at Agincourt or pits as at Cressay, or just on a wall or behind crenellations or on a hill as at Dublin Moor. And though the most expensive armour may well be proof against even the best arrow, even the most expensive armour will have some weaker points. If you want to move your arms or your legs, you have to have points where there is no plate. Maybe they'll be mail, ideally they'll be mail, but under your armpit, in your elbow, your knees, your groin, these cannot be fully armoured, because otherwise you just can't move your arms or your legs. Your eyes, well, you need to be able to see. You may have a visor that goes up, which means that you will be able to see better, but even if it's down, there's clearly going to be a weak spot. It may be a very lucky arrow that hits, but an archer is shooting, or capable of shooting, 10, 15, 20 shots in a minute, and an archer is not one lone man. There are many archers shooting many arrows very quickly. Somebody has to get lucky, but there's plenty of opportunities for luck. There are other arrowheads as well, not ones you'll see on the battlefield, not in my time anyway, but this is another kind of bodkin. The chisel point is a bodkin. This is a needle bodkin, and it is designed for an old-fashioned kind of armour. And it's still used, but this is mail. A series of links, all attached together, but lots of circles mean lots of holes, and well, the needle point will go straight through a hole. It'll hopefully slow it enough that the padding behind will prevent it going too deeply. But you can imagine that an arrow with a head like this being shot from a powerful bow, well, it can do an awful lot even through metal rings. And the other side you may see occasionally looks rather like that. And some people will tell you, well, it's clearly for cutting rope or for cutting the tendons of horses. I'm afraid there's a much more mundane explanation, and it's for taking birds on the wing. It has a cutting edge, but that cutting edge is wide, and it's designed to knock targets out of the sky, not to cut a rope, which would be a great feat of archery. And remember, mostly we're shooting for speed, not entirely for accuracy. You want to land 8 of 10 shots in a small area rather than aiming for a very small target. Goodness, well, I hope you found that interesting and useful. There's a lot more to be said about archers and archery more generally, so if you've got any questions, anything specifically you want to know, ask me in the comments and I'll be very pleased to get you an answer. If there's anything that you'd like me to explore on another topic or another part of our shared past, please again let me know and I'll be happy to investigate those. In the meanwhile, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. If you liked this video, please like it. If you found it useful or interesting, please share it. And if you'd like to join me again in the past, please do subscribe for more. So until next time, stay safe, stay happy, and keep on smiling. See you soon. Goodbye.